In this recording, we're going to talk about working with methods in a way that allows us to pass values into them and then let them work on those values. For example, I could write a method that adds 2 and 2, the answer being 4, of course. However, that method is rather restricted in that it's always going to tell me 4. A better way to do things might be to set it up so that the method data and the method operations are separated from each other, so that I could pass different values, maybe 3 and 4 or 5 and 6, and have it add those two things together. So with that in mind, we're going to introduce parameters and arguments. So I have a relatively simple method down here, but this time inside the parentheses, I have int, a data type, num. Num is a special type of variable known as a parameter variable. Um, The text refers to it as a formal parameter. Usually we'll just call those parameters. So what happens with a parameter variable is it's a variable that's usable only inside the body of the method. It can't be used from outside the body of the method, and that's a good thing. Um, Basically, we can set up our methods to be like black boxes, which have holes in the top for input. The statements inside the method not really visible to code outside the method, so they're protected. And then uh, in the next video, we're going to do something where we actually receive a value back out. But for the moment, so all my method does right now is it accepts a value. It's going to store that value in the parameter variable num, and then I can use the parameter variable num inside the body of the method, just like I use any other variable. So up here, we see some method calls, calling my display value method. Now, I want to point out that my IDE is being a little goofy. Um, when I call a method that accepts values, um, I put that value or values within the parentheses. That num colon is being added by my IDE. That is not how we would normally write it. Um, So normally, if I just have a value, I'm typing and I put a value in there. You saw my IDE change that, but I'm going to undo that. So what's going to happen? Well, I've written this with a number of method calls to show you how you can uh, make a number of method calls passing different forms of values. I can pass a literal value, like 5 in this case. I can pass a variable as long as that variable matches the data type of the parameter variable data type. Okay, so my parameter variable num, its data type is int. And you see up here, I set int x equal to 10. So I can pass x to this. I could have an expression. If you remember your order of operations, parentheses, prioritize the operations inside the parentheses in the PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, model. So if I have an expression, the expression will be solved, and then the solution will be sent down to the parameter variable num down here. Um, Here, this may look a little foreign. Basically, integer.parseInt allows me to convert, if possible, a string into an integer. I just do this to show a different way of uh, creating a value to send. Now, I've been kind of avoiding using the name, but all of these, the values being sent into a method are called arguments. Uh, the text also refers to them as actual parameters. I do not use that vocabulary, so I call these things arguments. But let's go ahead and run our pass arg. Okay, and so we run the I'm passing values to display value. We call display value, sending the number 5. So the argument 5 goes into the parameter variable num, and then I print it out here. Okay. Next, I call display value using the variable x, which was set to 10 up here. Next, I demonstrate writing an expression. So x times 4, x still 10, 10 times 4, 40. The 40 goes down into the int parameter variable and is written on the screen. And then the result of my integer parseInt, which would be the integer 700, gets passed into the parameter variable and then is used inside the body of the method, printing out the value of 700. Again, we go back up to our return point, and then I'm going to run this. Now I'm back in main. Okay, I'm going to break this program a little bit to show you some potential problems that you might run into as you first work with methods. So here, I'm going to change this to 5.5. Okay, the IDE knows the required type of the method is int. I attempted to supply a double, and the IDE is giving me a syntax error. Okay, let's make that go away. Another potential error is not supplying the correct number of arguments. Okay, so here, we're going to be able to create methods that accept multiple arguments. There will be a video on that. But I have to supply exactly the number of arguments that I have defined in my method declaration down below. Okay, so make that problem go away. This video would actually be a fairly decent place to also introduce the notion of the method signature. The method signature is basically the idea that the method name and the number and order of its parameters kind of defines the method. And what's interesting is we can do something called overloading, where I have multiple copies of the method with the same name, but with different data types. Or, oops. So here, notice, well, let's go back and do this again. If I have int num, and you know what, I'll change this to, I don't know, x. Notice my IDE is still complaining that I have already defined display value. However, if I change this to double x, now the IDE does not have a problem with this. I have overloaded the display value method, meaning depending on how I call it, Java is going to know which one of these two methods to call. I'll change this one up a little bit. If I now call display value with a double, it knows, and my IDE, again, this is just generated by my IDE, but it now knows that we are going to have to run this copy of the overloaded method as opposed to this copy of the other overloaded method. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun this. Okay, we can see that it did indeed run. You probably wouldn't do this on a regular basis as you're introducing basic methods, but this concept will be very important when we get to working with classes. All right, I hope this video was helpful, and there will be more.